It's now time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. Following President Bola Tinubu's promise to fix the national refineries, a key demand of Labour among other commitments, Nigeria Labour Congress (NLC) and Trade Union Congress (TUC) yesterday agreed to suspend their nationwide protest and return to the negotiating table with the federal government on measures to cushion the effects of the removal of petrol subsidy on Nigerians. Following President Bola Tinubu's promise to fix the national refineries, they had mentioned that they would suspend the strike the protest that had started yesterday. All right. Labour suspends protest and extends dialogue. Rufai, your take on this?
Okay, so a couple of things, Ayo. We had a strike, not a strike, a protest. So there was no strike. I don't know why we keep misinterpreting both. A protest is to be able to raise concerns about something. There was no shutdown. Banks worked. Other factors of production worked. But it was only Labour members at their installations that were on the streets. What was this for? To press demands. Did they achieve something? I don't think they achieved anything. I think they just achieved empty promises and committees being set up by the Senate. And only time will tell. In the bid of placating them, they said there was a promise that Port Harcourt Refinery will work by December 2023. Oh, come kidding me again. In the words of Baba Jasko, oh, jigby, 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 jigby. This same Port Harcourt Refinery that Timi Priya Silva, the Minister of Petroleum, said was going to be working by December 2022 is what President Tinubu has told us again will work by December 2023. What's going on here? What kind of country have we built? That is the cornerstone of the problem of government, lack of accountability. Just like they told us, they bought shares. Dangote Refinery is going to kick off by August. The first products are going to come out. Where is the product today? You see, it's not that people do not want to believe in government, but government gives the people less reasons every day to believe in them. At first, the government of the APC, when we started in 2015, said they were going to build up refineries, do turnaround maintenance. In over 8 years, that has not worked. That apart. Secondly, all the demands by Labour, a lot of them were not met. I should probably think Labour is just doing it to give the government the benefit of doubt so that they can sit on the table again. But is anything concrete going to come out? It remains to be seen. Let me put that caveat out there. But we can't keep doing this to ourselves. What is the rocket science in making refineries work? If not for corruption. And that's why when President Tinubu set up a special investigator to investigate the CBN, I think they should also do that to the NNPC. I think he should extend the Jimobaze's function mandate also to the NNPC. There are a lot of things that are going on there that they are not telling us. For us to build a country, we must build it with integrity. The reason why Nigerians find it difficult to believe government, because government has not given us the chance to believe them. It's just deadline promises here and there. And like I said, I support President Tinubu on his raft of measures to bring in palliatives. But if he doesn't get the implementation right, there will be problems. And vis-a-vis, we are talking about all of this. Then the president sends in 47 names, ministerial names. We are saying we want to cut cost of government. You are increasing the number of ministers. What is really going on here? We are saying something in one stead. We are negating it in another stead. The problem is a revenue problem. That's why we have debts. We don't have enough revenue. That's why we can't show up the defense even against our currency that is constantly being assaulted by global forces. And at the same time, we're increasing cost of governance. Ralph Waldo Emerson says something. He says, what you do speaks so loud, I can't hear what you say. I rest my case, Ayo.
Okay. Yesterday, Labour went out in protest. In some parts of the country, it was a strike. In some parts of the country, it was a protest. And the protest took place in quite a number of states: Kogi, Ondo, Ogun, Edo, Lagos, Federal Capital Territory, assuming various shapes. And they are threatened that the protest or the strike will be indefinite and total. It wasn't total, but at least we saw, labor, organized labor, mobilizing its various affiliates and branches and making statements, in the media. But by the end of yesterday, labor met with, President Tinubu. By the time Joe Ajero addressed the press at the villa yesterday, he said, organized labor will hold a meeting on Thursday, and that they will then decide on whether to call off the strike or not. Well, as it happened, by this morning, Festus Osifo had already said this action had been suspended. Now, what Joe Ajero said was that the meeting with the president was fruitful and productive. Now, what exactly is fruitful and productive? He said they were able to get commitments from the president. What are those commitments? He didn't spell them out. But what we know, what is clear there, is that the president has assured them that the Port Harcourt refinery will be fixed. Now, this Port Harcourt refinery has a long history. In 2021, NNPC, and the federal government had set aside $1.5 billion for the rehabilitation of that particular refinery. 1.5 billion since 2021. Now, in September 2022, Timipre Silva, who was Minister of State for Petroleum Resources then, said, by December 2022, the refinery will be ready. Now, in March 2023, the same former Minister of State for Petroleum Resources came forward and said, don't worry, by the second quarter of 2023, the Port Harcourt refinery in particular will be ready. And now is that same refinery that President Tinubu is telling us will be ready in December. Now, what exactly is being said? There are experts in the industry who say that, look, the refineries, Port Harcourt, Warri, Kaduna, cannot even be rehabilitated and they should be sold for scrap, and that they constitute a drain. But organized labor is optimistic. That's why they keep saying, if you can fix the refineries, then of course maybe you'll be able to reduce the cost of importation, even if there's still a gap, a supply gap. But at least it won't be that you are using foreign exchange to import finished product. Well, what is the guarantee that as we go close to December, the federal government of Nigeria will not again say, wait till second half of 2024, these refineries will be ready. Everything is always in the pipeline. So what guarantees, the trust that government requires? That's one leg of it. The second leg of it is skepticism about organized labor. The organized labor never sees protest through. They will come up, at least since about 2003, they will declare a strike, and then government will talk to them. And then they will say, government has given us concrete commitments. And they will call off the strike, and then that will be the end of it. It happened in 2003, it happened in 2018, it happened in 2020, twice this year, in March 2003, and now March 2023, and now, June 2023. You have had, the organized labor in Nigeria just doing body language. At the end of the day, government has its way. However, the protest that has been put on the table by the organized labor and also by individuals, or civil servants, either in Oyo State, Ibadan, at the Agodi Secretariat, or in Jalingo, Taraba State, or in Yola, Adamawa, should serve as a concrete reminder to government that Nigerians are in pains. Many of them who came out yesterday, all they kept saying was, let us breathe, let us breathe. So government has an obligation to move very fast with those palliatives, interventions, some government spokespersons call it. And, the people would like to see a difference because the pain is much. Or what is that funny phrase that other man they were screening for ministerial appointment use. The pain is much. It's much. But Nigerians want respite. And I hope that the various state governments will also move quickly, because it's not just the federal government. So they don't find themselves in the kind of situation in which Seyi Makinde of Oyo State found himself, with civil servants protesting on Monday and on Wednesday, whereas he could just have copied the template from maybe neighboring Ogun State and run with it. After all, Oyo State also got a lot of money from June FAC allocation.
All right, NLC suspending protests, suspending strike, whichever word is being used. The presidency was the first, one of the first to joyfully announce the fact that having negotiated, they'd come to some form of agreement, and so protests will be suspended. Recall that the presidency had at several times encouraged and urged the organized labor to not embark on the strike. Same with the House of Reps. A few other key stakeholders had come out to appeal to organized labor, saying that they should be patient, they should exercise patience, and that the Tinubu presidency was working. Despite this, even up to rumors making the rounds the night before the official commencement of the strike, of the protest, alleged rumors by Nigerian Labour Congress saying that they were still going to embark on it. There was no going back. They had reached an impasse in their conversations and negotiations, and so they were going to protest. Yesterday, we took it live. We took stories live from the streets where we saw protests on the streets of Abuja. They marched to the House of Assembly. We saw Comrade Ayuba Waba, former NLC president, speaking live here on Arise News. We saw Comrade Joe Ajaero also as part of the protest in Lagos. It was a bit quiet, but in Ikeja, there were protests as well. They had protested and gone to the State House of Assembly to deliver a letter to the government, just expressing their discontent. They said that their demands had not been met. Key of this, of course, was the repair of the refineries here in Nigeria, minimum wage for workers. Now, what has changed between Monday night into Tuesday, and now Tuesday evening into Wednesday morning, when they've changed their minds and said, you know what, we're no longer protesting, we're going to give the government some time. So they suspended it, they didn't eliminate it completely. The key thing is the addressing of the refineries. And it's based on the premise that the president has said that before the end of this year, the Port Harcourt refinery will be up and running. He's actually not the first person to say this. Earlier this year, we had Mr. Mele Kyari, the GMD of NNPCL, on this show, this very show, and he said that the reason why there was a delay in the Port Harcourt refinery being up and running is as a result of issues around global value chain supply as a result of the Ukraine-Russian war. And so, because of that, they had some issues. Otherwise, things would have been on track. However, when at the commencement of the repair of the Port Harcourt refineries and the refineries across, they had mentioned that it was going to happen in 3 phases. That by the first quarter of 2023, at least at the last announcement by the former Minister of State for Petroleum, Mr. Timipre Silva, he had mentioned that by the first quarter of 2023, the first phase would be completed. Remember that Port Harcourt Refinery should potentially be the biggest refinery in Nigeria in terms of its total output of barrels per day of petrol that it can potentially produce. They said first phase will be completed, and then the second and third phase will be staggered throughout 2023, and by December 2023, the refinery should be working. But has already been established. From 2022, we have received this kind of promise. Unfortunately, the promise hasn't been kept. We have just had promises upon promises, extensions upon extensions. So my question to organized labor is that what was different from the assurance of the president this time that made them confident enough to suspend their protests based on his promises that it would work by the end of this year? What was the real motivation? Because after a while, Nigerians will begin to take announcements of protests and perhaps strikes as a joke. If you announce a strike or a protest and then you list out your key demands and key issues, and then you go to the negotiation table, and what you're coming out with as an announcement or a report is shrouded in a lot of mystery in terms of all the finer details. What did they say that was different from what the president had said in his address that they didn't agree then, and now they have decided to suspend their protest? These are the questions we begin to ask. And I asked when they first announced this, do these measures, do they work? At the end of the day, what happens is that you galvanize a number of Nigerians, ask them to down their tools, they are losing money, and then there are conversations that we don't have the full import of, and then you cancel the strike and the protest without much being changed. It begs to question, then what are we really doing? Who is really standing up and speaking up for the common man? What was different? To me, it was just the same thing. There's nothing different in what they'd announced from what the president had said. So why embark on the protest in the first place? These are questions that perhaps organized labor can throw more light when they decide to give a detailed report of what truly ensued in terms of the promises of the president to Nigerians to alleviate the sufferings. We haven't seen anything yet today in terms of action, just promises. We'll move on to our next story now. The Nigerian government has put its armed forces on standby to carry out military action against the coupists in Niger Republic. If the ongoing dialogue by the heads of government of the Economic Community of West African Countries or States, ECOWAS, fails, this day learned last night that the move was part of the ECOWAS resolution where member states were obligated to place their armed forces on standby in case there would be a need for military action, which they stressed would be a last resort. Also, to show a degree of seriousness with a clear message, major cities in Niger had begun to face rolling blackouts as Nigeria, on the instruction of President Bola Tinubu, had cut supplies to its northern neighbor, the country's electricity company, Niger Republic, has said. Also yesterday, ECOWAS restated its decision to use military force to restore democratic rule in the Republic of Niger, saying failure to do so could render the regional bloc a laughing stock in the Committee of Democratic Nations. It, however, dismissed threats by Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea-Bissau, led by military regimes who threatened war against any military action in Niger. All right, Rufai, it's escalating. We're seeing more updates with regards to
we're having updates, but what I've always suggested is, please, we can keep it with sanctions, keep the blackouts in. Border closure might not probably be the order of the day because the borders are very porous. People will just filter into the border and there's exchange and all of that. And keep the conversation on. In one of the ideas put forward, no-fly zone, have you ever thought of what a no-fly zone is? If my memory serves me right, there was a no-fly zone that was done in Libya in 2011, 2012, during the Gaddafi wars in Libya. The Western nations, it cost them about $1 billion USD as of 2011. And also, please, Ayo, factor the time value of money. $1 billion in 2011. It cost them about $1 billion. Because for no-fly zones, you need your platforms up in the sky. As at then, there was a fighter jet that France uses called the Rafale. We don't have the Rafale because it's very, very high-grade sophisticated jet. It cost them 30,000 euros to keep the Rafale in the air. Have we ever asked ourselves, how much does it cost for every missile fired? Averagely, a missile will set you back 50,000 to 100,000 euros. So the costs are definitely going to be enormous. In an economy where we are struggling to defend our currency, I do not support. I love my country so much. I'm a patriot. But for the love of mercy, we beg. Are there other ways we can talk about these things that are happening in Niger? Because already Burkina Faso and another country, Mali, if my memory serves me right, I said any aggression against Niger is an aggression against them. I see that the ECOWAS service chiefs are coming together in Abuja. Please, let us be circumspect about this. Wars cost money. Military operations cost money. We have our own internal fights and battles here. We're fighting with banditry and insurgency and all of that. We have not solved effectively. Can we talk a little more? and I'm making this clarion call. Not because I don't support my country, not because I want to be a pacifist, but let us look at the cost implications. Because you see, if ECOWAS goes in, it is Nigeria that is going in invariably. Nigeria will put a sizable portion of the troops down and a sizable portion of the money. I would rather that we are using that money to defend our currency. Yes, at least to shore up our currency base so that things don't go gaga. I would rather we are putting that money in our economy, not frittering that money away in Niger. The days we did ECOMOG, we had some leeway. But what were even the results and the lessons we learned from ECOMOG? But I support the power cuts to them. Let's look for other measures. Let's talk even further.
Okay, I think the matter is as follows. The deadline that ECOWAS has given Niger will expire this Sunday. Apparently, the coupists in Niger, they've decided to snub President Tinubu in particular. Under normal circumstances, General Sani will probably have sent a delegation to President Tinubu as chairman of ECOWAS, to just seek some kind of, rapprochement for whatever it is worth. Now, ECOWAS had also taken steps to send delegations to Niger. First, President Patrice Talon of Republic of Benin. Second, President Mohamed Debi of Chad. And then I understand that General Abdulsalami Abubakar of Nigeria has also led a delegation to Niger. In spite of all of this, there has been no positive development because it looks like the coup leaders are determined to dig in. Now, the development that we have seen is not really a very encouraging development. It is the case of a number of countries, Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry, Burkina Faso, Mali, and I think Chad also, saying that they are opposed to any kind of military intervention in Niger. In fact, the other two countries, Mali and Niger and Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry, they are saying that any attack on Niger will get them also involved in the law. They are creating their own United Nations inside West Africa, causing division within ECOWAS. Algeria, that is to the north of Niger, has also issued a statement saying that they cannot afford to have any military intervention across their border for any reason. So that's the complexity that has developed. Now, yesterday, the army chiefs of the ECOWAS countries met in Abuja. Now, these other countries within West Africa, namely Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, boycotted the meeting because they said they don't believe in the idea of any attack and that in any case, ECOWAS should not intervene in what is going on in Niger. That again makes it a bit complex. So when the deadline expires, what is going to happen? Is Nigeria going to go to war in Niger? There is an international dimension. The Russian Federation has said it does not support any military intervention in Niger. And the Russian ambassador to Nigeria has been quoted as saying that ECOWAS should explore constitutional means. The same Russian Federation that is not exploring lawful means
in Ukraine
is preaching to ECOWAS. You see the kind of funny things we see, in all these arenas that we monitor on a daily basis. However, when James Cleverly met with President Tinubu yesterday, he said, the UK is behind ECOWAS. So you see that there is an international dimension to it. So if you go in there and you launch an attack, there are so many interests that have shown their determination. So Niger, the coupists in Niger, can immediately form a coalition of soldiers who will face the ECOWAS team that you send there. So a risky, costly operation it may turn out to be. Okay, in the midst of all of this, if ECOWAS even launches an assault, in the 1990s, yes, we did it in Liberia, with mixed results. Okay, I think ECOMOG also went to Sierra Leone at some point. And then in 2017, we intervened in Gambia to get, the Hittite ruler there, out of the place. So there's no guarantee that even if you go into this military confrontation, it will work. And that's why some people have been asking questions, like Professor Badijo, who's coming onto this program shortly, asking questions about cost. Can Nigeria afford it? Because all these other countries that attended meeting, when it comes to supply of troops, okay, can they back it up with logistics? Okay, the European Commission says ECOWAS has not contacted it to ask if they need any other help beyond the economic sanctions that the EU has imposed. That is another side of it. The United Nations, is it possible that Russia, having a veto power, if the matter goes to the United Nations, won't Russia veto the intervention and stop the UN from even providing any kind of backup? In other words, our submission is that Nigeria needs to tread very carefully. We have shut down power supply to Niger, okay? Well, what if Niger decides to find a way to build their own dam on the Niger River and then build their own dam and not rely on Nigeria for electricity? So that one may not be so much. And if they do their dam, maybe it will not affect us too. 85% of our electricity supply in Igmi and those other places comes from gas powered. 15% from hydro, Shiroro, Kanji, Jeba. Okay, so we don't really seem to have an upper hand. And then the effect on those states that border Niger, Katsina, Sokoto, all those states in the north, they could become targets. So I think the bigger issue is to avoid a situation whereby the northern corridor of our country is turned into a war zone. And in war, there will be casualties, not just reputation, that we seem to be suffering from now with all those coup leaders in Niger snubbing the president of Nigeria. Some of these people have guts, But in any case, our own sovereign interest is more important to us. And protecting the interests of Nigeria should be the primary task, not ego. So these are the dimensions. But we'll see what will happen. If ECOWAS, having promised use of force, does not go ahead, yes, ECOWAS will lose face. But let's see if mediation will help, if negotiation will help. Some people have even gone as far as, leave the people of Niger alone, let them solve their problems. Why should we be bothered? But no, that will not be how to see it in real terms.
Yes, it's a dicey situation because, first of all, it's the guts of Niger Republic. This is approximately 25 million in terms of population, one of the poorest countries in the world, according to the UN. So their population size is like Lagos State. Imagine a country that's largely dependent in many ways on their neighboring countries, particularly Nigeria, stand up against negotiations, coming to the table, and even sanctions. The leader of the coup and the one who, General Abdurrahmani Chiani had said that ECOWAS sanctions and ECOWAS intervention is illegal and inhumane. They're saying that it is now an attack on their sovereignty. Therefore, Nigerians themselves should stand against any kind of interference by other nations, including the ECOWAS bloc. For Nigeria, it is particularly for President Bola Tinubu, it is an opportunity to demonstrate the superpower of Nigeria on not just the West African bloc or side of Africa, but African continent as a whole. It would be his first, perhaps, major international, local international intervention as president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So the world is watching, and Nigerians are watching as well. So it's very dicey in terms of the stance, in terms of egos, as has already been mentioned, in terms of a demonstration of superiority, might, and power as a nation and as a country on both sides. Obviously, Niger is on the short end of the stick because of the fact that they are not, in terms of economy, size, up to that of Nigeria. However, What is fueling or giving them the power for the guts and the show of bravery, as it were, against the ECOWAS bloc? It is interventions by countries who have also come under military rule in very recent times, and also, as Dr. Abati had mentioned, interference from the international world. So it begs the question, as a number of analysts and observers have asked, who is really behind this coup? Whose interests are at stake? What is in it for Russia? What is in it for the United States? What is in it for Niger themselves? Is this just on the surface? These are questions that have come up, particularly with this coup. Now, I doubt it very much if Niger would capitulate before the deadline given to it by ECOWAS, which is on Sunday. I do believe that they are going to go all the way, especially with the backings of the countries that have come. On Wednesday, that was yesterday, one of the coup leaders went to Mali and addressed the Malians, saying that they ought to support them and they shouldn't, allow the threat to take over. This is the body language and the statements coming out from Niger, so they're not going to back down. It will now be time for ECOWAS and Nigeria in particular to decide, and I doubt if, again, they would go back on their word saying that they will have to use military force as a last resort. So brace up, Nigeria. We are possibly going to intervene with our military. And from the leaked documents yesterday, you see that we're already taking position to go in post-Sunday deadline. So the matter of cost, like Rufai had mentioned, then comes in. And in a few minutes, we're going to be speaking to our guest today who will be taking us even deeper into analyzing the Nigerian situation and talking about what Nigeria as a nation, our position, the costs, and what it would portend for even humanitarian intervention for Niger at the moment. I mean, it's, like I mentioned earlier on, it's a dicey situation, but I do think that Nigeria should get ready. We possibly will go into Niger military intervention.